Hey, wake up. They let us get to Friday again. And of course, that means it's time for another episode of the Leaf Podcast. And if you think I have any idea what to title this episode, then I don't know, you're a better title maker than me, because not one clue. But I do have a lot of weird encounters for you this week. So I didn't know this until fairly recently, but it turns out that Scotland and the British Isles have their own version of some kind of Bigfoot-like creature. I say Bigfoot-like because the descriptions seem to vary a bit. And not only that, there seem to be some supernatural occurrences that happen around this thing as well. And this entity, creature, cryptid, whatever it is, has a very old name, the Amphir Yothmore, or simply the Grey Man. And for this first sighting, we have to go all the way back to 1891. A scientist, mountaineer, and explorer, and also a member of the Royal Geographical Society, J. Norman Colley. He was hiking near the summit of the Ben Macdie Mountain, and then this is what he says happened. I was returning from the cairn on the summit in a mist when I began to think that I was hearing something else merely than the noise of my own footsteps. Every few steps, I heard a crunch, and then another crunch, as if somebody was walking after me, but taking steps 3 or 4 times the length of my own. I said to myself, this is all nonsense. I listened and I heard it again, but I could see nothing in the mist. As I walked on and the eerie crunch sounded behind me, I was somehow seized with terror, and I took to my heels. I staggered blindly among the boulders for 4 or 5 miles, nearly down to Rothiemurch's forest. Whatever you make of it, I do not know, but there's something very odd about the top of Ben Macdie, and I will not go back there again. Now, at first glance, this encounter may look like that it's just a guy hearing stuff out in the mist, but apparently a thing with the Grey Man is that the mist seems to get thicker, you seem to get disoriented, and then suddenly you're paralyzed with fear. And not only this, the creature itself has been rarely ever completely seen. Sometimes it appears as a giant shadowy figure, and is largely only ever heard or seen in that way. So this is why I say that there could be a supernatural thing about it. And I think that would be the sense of dread that a lot of people are seen to be feeling whenever they come close to this thing, or the fact that the mist seems to get thicker, harder to see through, and then you begin to see the shadowy figure approach you. So after the mountaineer recounted this experience and it went public, other mountaineers came forward with their own accounts of seeing or hearing other weird things up on the mountain. But one interesting account comes from 1958, when another mountaineer and naturalist, Alexander Tunion, he also had quite the experience up there, and here's what he had to say about it. I spent a 10-day leave climbing alone in the Cairngorms. One afternoon, just as I reached the summit of the cairn of Ben Macdie, mist swirled across and it enveloped the mountain. The atmosphere became dark and oppressive. A fierce and bitter wind whisked among the boulders, and an odd echoing sound came through the mist. Loud footsteps, it seemed. Then another and another. A strange shape loomed up, receded, and then came charging at me. Without hesitation, I whipped out the revolver and fired 3 shots at the figure. When it still came at me, and the bullets had no effect, I bared down the path, reaching Glenderry in a time that I have never bettered. You may ask, was it really the Fear Yothmore? Frankly, I think it was. And I think the reason why that people may say that it's Bigfoot-like is that it kind of adopts some of the same things that lead up to a Bigfoot sighting. There's like the footsteps that seem to be 3 or 4 times the size of your own, and then the weird, inexplicable sense that you're being watched. And then, there's the part where all of a sudden you feel paralyzed with fear. I have heard of that happening in a lot of Bigfoot encounters before they even see anything. And I figure with a name that old, there has to be 1,000 years or more of stories about something being on that mountain. Whether it's supernatural or whether it's like a Bigfoot type thing or whether it's something else entirely, it's hard to say. But what do you think down in the comments? And now this next encounter is a little more extreme and a little more gory, I guess is the word. So maybe you want to skip ahead a few minutes if this kind of stuff bothers you. So for this encounter we go to October of 1894, and this time we go to Canada, Ontario, and this is the Greater Mattawa River region of central Ontario. A native French-Canadian hunter by the name of Little Jack was guiding a father and son. This father and son were of the Sears family of Chicago, Illinois. Now the whole reason why they were out there was they wanted to hunt moose, and they had heard that up here are some really big trophy moose. So at one point as they were paddling along this river, now this was also at this point close to the Ontario-Quebec border, the father and son said they wanted to be taken deeper into more remote territory. They had heard stories of even bigger trophy moose. Little Jack was very hesitant to do so. The natives of the area and many other hunters spoke of a hairy giant, or something of the sort, in that area. It was said to measure between 12 and 15 feet tall. Of course, at this time, those were just rumors, just stories, but it was enough to give him pause, to spook him a little. Now he did agree to take them out there, especially when the father offered much more money, and this was unfortunately a bad decision. When they reached the general area, they came to a lake. Little Jack told them not to try and cross the lake, as they should stay away from these thickly wooded areas. He gave them very specific spots to stay at, and he kept a constant eye on them. Now, as he's there, the stories of all those hairy giants and all these things like that were obviously lurking in the back of his mind. At some point, the son broke the rules and began paddling across the lake. Little Jack called out to warn him that he said not to go there. As he was watching the son paddle closer and closer to this thickly wooded area, he noticed a large shape that was now looming through the trees. One has to wonder if the son also saw something like this and believed that it was a huge moose. And apparently, no matter how much he called out, the boy didn't seem to hear him. He seemed compelled to go to that other side of the lake. The boy pulled his canoe ashore and then ventured off into the trees. Little Jack then heard several gunshots coming from the rifle, and then silence. Little Jack got to the shore as fast as he could, and as soon as he got there, the Sears boy came flying out of the woods in a terrified panic. He looked as if he'd seen a ghost. He was completely pale. Right after him came out of the tree line the beast that Little Jack had heard about, that he had warned them about, and it was no moose. This hairy ape-like beast allegedly stood about 15 feet tall. In seconds, this huge monster was right upon the Sears kid. Of course, the Sears kid tried to escape, but it was no use. This creature grabbed the kid and then gruesomely twisted his head clean off his shoulders. Little Jack purportedly fired round after round after round at the beast, but the bullets did nothing. The creature held on to the deceased boy's legs and dragged his corpse off into the woods, all while holding the head in the other hand. When Jack got back, he told the father, and of course, the father was in a rage. He was furious. He wanted to track the monster down and enact vengeance. Little Jack convinced him that this was much too dangerous, given what they had just done to his son, and that the fact that bullets just weren't working. They headed to the nearest settlement for help. An armed search party was launched to at least try to find the boy's body, and over the coming days, they really only heard these inhuman screams, and all they really found was the boy's rifle that had apparently been broken or twisted in some way. But they found nothing else. Now, there's not really much known what happens after this. That's pretty much the end of the story right here. It seems to be one of those instances where what happened to little Jack and the seer's father is not really known. I will link the article in the description so you can go and read that one in much more detail and many other ones that are also in this article. I've only gone over a couple of them, and there are a lot more very interesting ones in there as well, so I'll leave that in the description. And this next one isn't to do with anything Bigfoot related or maybe even cryptid related. It's just really bizarre, so I figured I would share it. So this guy says that he was an ex-Marine who was working a security detail for a off-the-grid company. He says, "Me and about 12 other guys were assigned to patrol or monitor the upper levels of some old medical building. We weren't allowed to go down to the lower levels. Our clearance wasn't high enough." This was an actual quote from our superiors. "There were 2 elevators that led to the lower levels. There were no stairs. I was asked to inform the patrols whenever somebody was coming up those elevators. It's 2 a.m. and nobody is supposed to be in the lower labs. And then I see the light come on my security desk. Elevator in use. I radio in. All patrols. We have the lower level elevators currently in use past the designated time. Can anyone check it out?" A patrol replies, "I am near. I'll head over and see what's up." So while I'm watching the patrol, he comes near the elevator on the security camera. The elevator opens. For some reason, it's pitch black inside the elevator, so much so that you can't see an inch. All the elevators are usually very well lit. The patrol sounds over the radio, "F." I see him raise his gun on cam. I get on the radio, "All patrols to lower level access elevators, ASAP." Actually, I was pretty good friends with this guy, so I pick up my gun and I begin rushing toward the elevator. Me and everyone else gets there, weapons raised. The elevator is still pitch black. Our flashlights aren't penetrating the darkness. The patrol who responded to check out the elevator comes out of nowhere from behind us. He says, "What's going on?" We're all looking at him. Everyone's now looking at me. We look back at the elevator. The lights flicker, and the elevator closes, going back down to the labs. Not only me, but everyone heard him swear over the radio, and when we reviewed the footage, it clearly showed the one patrol approaching the elevator. The thing is, on the video, the patrol guy who came from behind us has his gun raised and enters the elevator. Upon entering it, the elevator closes and reopens as soon as I turn the corner on the camera. The guy who had entered and then seemingly appeared behind us somehow had no symptoms of any confusion or anything wrong. The company that we were working for reviewed the footage and then immediately paid us out the rest of our contract, and we were transferred the next day. This was besides the patrol that was seen entering the elevator on camera. He had to stay, and I haven't heard from him since. So of course, what the hell do you think happened here? What kind of operation do you think this was? And better yet, what did it mean when the elevator opened and it was just pitch black? It's already sketchy enough that there's elevators to these unknown floors, but no stairs that go toward them. It kind of sounds like they're trying to keep something in or out. But I didn't know what to make about that story. It's from 2014, but it's unknown when it actually happened. So what kind of building do you think this was? It says medical facility, but that could mean pretty much anything. And this last one I have for you is equally bizarre. I have no idea what this could be or anything. Now the guy admits at the very first that he was drunk. He was coming home from a bar, and he says that this takes place in a third world country, but he doesn't say which one. He also says that he was at that point in being drunk when you are still pretty aware of what's going on, but you're kind of in that euphoric stage, and this is when he decided to walk home. And he says that there's this thing that happens around his town, his city, and it's the reason why that people don't sleep on the streets. And he says that his house is kind of just outside of the town or city where he lives, so he's walking along the road, and as you can tell, when you leave the city, things begin to get more fields, more trees, all that kind of stuff. And he said that there was some people walking in whatever direction, but then things got quiet. And he says that that when you're in a rural area, when things get really quiet, some weird shit is about to happen. He says that he had just passed a field and then just passed a convent, and then he saw something strange in the middle of the road. It looked like a dog, but it was extremely large, and it seemed to be caramel colored. And he said that this dog, or whatever it was, wasn't even looking at him. It had no interest in him. It was staring at something on the other side of the road. He follows the dog's gaze, and he sees a man who is a known homeless man. He's standing there. He seems to be frozen in place. He said he was a little far away, but he could even tell that the man was shaking, almost as if he was trying to move, but he really couldn't. And then this dog, or what he thought was a dog, stands up. This whole time, he's just still walking, but he's walking as quietly as he can so as to not draw attention to himself. He comes to the point where he's directly across and directly on the other side of the dog and the man. And then this dog seems to have something like human-like hands. Very weird. He's wondering what he drank to be seeing this. But then he's like, there's no way that I'm this drunk. I've never been this drunk. And then this dog thing walks over to the man who seems to be paralyzed. It comes over and puts two of its paws, hands, whatever you want to call them, on the man's shoulders and stares at him directly in the eyes. The man begins to shake. He begins to make weird noises. And then suddenly, he just drops to the ground. As soon as he dropped, the dog got back down on all fours and began kind of just acting like a dog again and wandered off into the field on the other side of the road. Now, of course, he was terrified, so he took off running. He was so scared that he was being followed that he ran past his house and then took off through a field in the opposite direction that eventually led back to his own backyard. He says he didn't leave his house for a full day afterwards, but when he did, he asked some local people if they heard anything weird. Someone then told him that a local homeless man had something happen to him, but he wouldn't say what. He was seemingly in a catatonic state. He was found by the nuns at the convent, and they've been looking after him for the past day or so. He doesn't say anything else or if the man ever come out of it or not. That's pretty much where this ends. But I have to ask you, what the hell? What do you think happened here? What do you think this dog thing was? What do you think it did to him? There's no answers. So I will leave it there. I think that these 4 or 5 encounters were really bizarre, really strange, and you don't really know what's going on in some of them. So, with that, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. If you did, please like and subscribe. And if you want to use one of your hype things, I don't know what you can call them, hype things is what I'm calling them for now. If you would like to use one of those on a video on my channel, I would be eternally grateful. If you want to support the channel in a different way, I have a PayPal, a Patreon, I have memberships and super thanks here on YouTube. But also, just watching the video, sharing the video, liking the video really helps too. And with all of that, I thank you for pulling up a stump. I thank you for watching. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you Sunday.